Hello and welcome to another episode of Run Till You're Done. For this episode, we have the privilege this time of interviewing the 200 and 400 metre V35 British Women's Champion of 2025. She is just recently back from the European Championships and we cannot wait to hear how she got there and how she got on. So welcome to the podcast, Lauren Jobson.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks so much for having us.
Well, Lauren, there's going to be loads of questions because what you do is definitely, it's almost like a different sport than what we do. So we'll get on to what it is, but to begin with, how did you get into running if running is the same type of running? If we all do the same thing. We all run. We all forward motion. How did you get into it?
Absolutely. Well, obviously I'm from the Northeast and we have the very iconic Great North Run here. And I think when you've got the Great North Run on your doorstep, it's, amazing. It does get a lot of people into running and a lot of people involved. So I signed up for my first Great North Run, I think in 2012. So I was sort of, later to running. And at the time I worked with a pharmacist who ran for Blyth Running Club, and he kept saying to us, "Oh, you should join us," And I kept saying, "Oh, Kevin Freeman, he was called," and I kept saying, "Oh, I want to run on the times that at a time when it's convenient for me. I don't want to be tied down to sort of club running times." And really, what I meant by that was, I'm going to run a few, casual 10Ks and then try and rock up and run a half marathon. It wasn't, I wasn't kind of doing any structured training at all. And then it was the summer of 2013 and I signed up to do Edinburgh Marathon in 2014. And it was at that point that I thought, actually, I'm going to need some help here. That you could wing a half, but I definitely couldn't wing a marathon. So then I joined Blyth Running Club and then have done every distance from 100k to 100 meters.
So it was the Great North Run your very first race that you'd signed up for?
No, so before the Great North Run, I'd done like a warm-up run. It was Blyth's run, actually. It was Blyth's 10K's run. So it's a 10K and I ran it with my sister. And we were, and I should have known from the early signs here that I was a short distance runner. We sort of ran it and we got a 4 mile in and I'm complaining to my sister, I'm like, my back hurts, my legs are hurting, my knees are hurting, and I was hating everything about it. So my sister slows right down, jogs with me. And then I knew that we were coming to the finish and I thought, I feel great. And I was like, let's go for it. My sister was like, oh, well, she hasn't got that speed in her legs. And I just left her. After she'd, stayed with me, the whole way around, it got to 400 meters. And I was like, well, I'm going to go now. And just sort of darted off. The Blyth 10K was my very first run. And then the Great North Run was my very second, my second run. So, yeah.
What kind of times were you getting back in those days?
So I think we ran the Great North Run in 2:14. So it was kind of that made me think, this sub 2 is sort of, a lot of people's dream for a half, isn't it? And I was like, well, if I ran 2:14 and I only really ran, a couple of 10Ks before that, if I actually train, I could get that under 2 hours. So it was sort of that I guess it kept us going and spurred us on to run another half. And I got under on my second run. I got under the 2, but I just scraped the barrel at 1:59, but I took it.
It counts.
It did. It did.
And how did you find Edinburgh Marathon? Because that seems to get quite mixed reviews.
So I did it. I did it for charity. So the day was very, very special. I was raising money in memory of a friend who sadly lost her battle to cancer. And I think because of that, the day was just amazing. I felt like the crowd very much reminded us of the Great North Run. There was people out. It was lovely weather. There was so many people supporting. A nice flat course for a marathon. It was. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I loved the day. The training killed us, literally killed us. But the day was special, and it was. I didn't find, not that I didn't find it hard, but it was, I think it was 4:17 that I ran, so it wasn't a hard, it wasn't a hard pace. I wasn't pushing it or anything. It was just about just going there and enjoying it and taking in the atmosphere and sort of step by step remembering why I was doing it. But no, I definitely enjoyed it. So when you said that you were going to enter the half, I was like, yes, yes, yes.
So
You were definitely really encouraging. We were just chatting before we started recording, and for those that don't know, Lauren was actually one of the very first people that I had met and followed on Instagram before I even started running. So Lauren has been there for me from the start and been one of my biggest supporters. So it's Lauren's fault partly I've got into this and doing what we're doing just now.
I've got nothing to do with the crazy distances you do now.
you just said there you're doing the run to remember why you do this. One of our later questions, but I'll ask it now instead, is if you remember, why is it that you run?
So yeah, I guess in the very beginning, even my first Great North Run, it was about raising, money for charity. And then when my friend lost her battle cancer, that was the reason why, distance was never ever for me. But I guess, I didn't feel like anybody would want to sponsor us for a 5K or, because I'd done stuff like the half marathon, I thought I had to push myself. So I'd done another half, and then I said, right, if I raise over, I think, the sponsors started to dry up and I got around about £8,000. And I was like, if I raise over 15,000, I'll enter a marathon. So obviously everybody wanted to see me have that torture and sponsored me again. So yeah, so that was definitely in the beginning my reason why I got into running. And now I guess my reason why is it's for me. It's, I'm not mummy, I'm not wife, I'm not Lauren at work. It's, it's my time and it's something that I enjoy. And I'm very competitive and it feeds that, which is good, So yeah, definitely it's your time for you, isn't it? When you've got kids and working and yeah.
That's a nice. I always like asking that question, and when Mike asks it, because we always seem to get really good answers, and it never disappoints. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. It is nice to hear, isn't it? Because everybody has got their own journey on getting into running, and it's always nice and inspiring, I think, to hear other people's why.
And before we move on to what you do, which we can't wait to hear about, you mentioned you've done a 100K. Was that an event or was it a crazy training run?
Yeah, I'd say 100K. We did do it. It did take 22 hours. So it was very much a run walk. But it was after I'd done the marathon. And some guys from the club were like, oh, we're going to go and do St. Cuthbert's Way. And they're like, you should come, we should do that. It'll be great fun. And it wasn't an organised event. We got, there was a couple of them that went in a little minibus and they met us at checkpoints that we had to get to. And they're like, oh, it'll be great. And it's, dead social and we'll just take our time and bit run, bit walk. So I said, oh, it sounds lovely. Oh my gosh. I went from that to 100 meters. It was literally that just flipped it on its head. I really, really struggled. So mentally, I don't know how you do it, like mentally to put yourself through that torture and, not think about it or just think actually I'm okay with it, or it was just it was really, really difficult. And I remember it got to sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, we're in the Chevy, the heavens were absolutely pouring down, we're soaking wet, and the guys who were in the checkpoint bus were like, right, we really need to think about whether or not we can continue, this is getting like unsafe now. And I was just, my eyes lit up and I was like, great, let's just stop this now. And I think, the other guys were like, it was a case of run till you're done, and they were not done. And they were like, I'm not stopping here. I thought, oh gosh. And I just didn't want to be the only person that said, no, I'm not. Yeah, like I'm happy not to do it. So I carried on and carried on and carried on. And I did, I made it. But yeah, it was the toughest thing that I have ever done. And like I say, it was quite, casual, because it was so steep and hilly, and, the terrain that we're on, it wasn't where we were just kind of flat out running. And we stopped at one of the guys' mum lived at Wooler, and we got to Wooler at 4 a.m. She had the kettle on, and, I had a cup of tea and, a little biscuit and got going again. And so it was, quite casual for that sort of distance, but it was hard. It was so hard. And then, like I say, the next year I got into track.
Well, I was going to say, if you're considering longer distances, I hate to burst your bubble, but it doesn't get easy.
No. It was honestly, and I got home and my mum had come to see us and she was like, my goodness, you look like you need to go to hospital. And I was like, I feel like I need to go to hospital, ma'am. I think I was on the sofa for a week. And there's a picture and we're on a picnic bench afterwards, and everybody's, standing around with a celebratory drink, and I'm fast asleep on the bench, and they're all standing around us smiling. Like, no, I'm not okay.
What year was that? How long after was that since you'd started running then to make that jump?
So I'd started running in 2012. I ran the marathon in the May 2014, and we'd done the 100K in the June after the marathon. So 2014, yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Having done that, and you said it's the hardest thing you've ever done, are you glad now that you have done it?
Oh, absolutely. Do you know, just so that I know that it's something I'll never go back to. No, I think I would have been really disappointed with myself if I hadn't have completed it. Do you know, because especially, 2:00 in the morning, I'd put all that work in from 10 a.m. Do you know, if I had a kind of walked away, I would have been really disappointed. So I'm so pleased that I've finished it. And, it's when you say to people, oh yeah, I've done 100K, I'm like, 100K, that's a long way. Like, it's a good bragging point, certainly, but yeah, never again.
It is a long way.
It is a long way. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's only about, 2,000 times longer than your normal race?
Yeah.
Only.
So you've said you've done that 100K. Mm-hmm. That was on the St. Cuthbert's Way, you said you did that?
Yeah.
That was trail mostly, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Again, that's totally the opposite of the sort of terrain that you're normally running on. Mm-hmm. How does that feel? Did you enjoy the off-roadness?
No. Do you know what I've done? So because I'm very competitive, I could never mentally, I can't do the training that's required for the longer distance stuff. I just can't get my head around it. And so then when I would do sort of, there's a Gateshead 10-mile trail around here that I've done. When I do those sort of races, I can't compete, or, I can't come high up in the field, and because I'm competitive, that annoys me. So yeah, and then I found the track and I was like, oh my God, like I've got speed and I hadn't really even trained for it. It was just quite natural. Whereas the trail stuff and the longer road stuff and the distance stuff it just felt like a slog.
Yeah, I can totally understand what you mean there, because I don't think that I could compete at a shorter distance, but I've got the sort of endurance, and I feel that I can compete at the longer distance. So it's the opposite, but exactly the same feeling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how did you done that 100K? Mm-hmm. How did you then move on to track?
So I didn't really know a lot about track, to be honest. And then the club was doing an event and they're like, oh, we're going to this track and field meeting. Do you want to come along? And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Just thinking about athletics at school, and I was always quite good at it. So I turned up and they're like, oh, like you usually run in spikes. So I thought cross-country spikes. So I turned up with my cross-country spikes with, my big long spikes in, and I was like, I've got my spikes muddy as anything, and they're like, oh no, they're not for the track. So I ran an 800. Was the first, you just basically filled events in, so it wasn't really like, it was like the team just needed points and these were where they had spaces. So I ran an 800 and they're like, oh, take it easy, because it's 2 laps, and although it doesn't sound a lot, but when you're trying to push at pace, it is. So I took the first lap really easy and just sort of like kind of jogged it. And then I thought, oh, right, okay, I better try and catch some people up on this second lap. And I ran that second lap and, I pushed hard, and I just thought, I had my road trainers on. I think they were Asics at the time, very high cushioned, shoes, not anything for light or speed or anything. But I just was like, oh, that was a bit, I ran that one lap and I was like, that was a bit of me. But then, and I loved it, and I kind of did carry on track. But once I had the kids, it's really hard to stick to that, because, the track for me is 40 minutes away. So I've got to drive that and drive back. Whereas, once the kids came along, it was so much easier just to put them in the buggy and, away you go and run a park run and all that sort of stuff. So This year has actually only been the first year where I fully gave track everything. I've always dabbled between track and road, but no more than 5K when I say road.
So we've kind of hinted at, we said that you're the female veteran, the old age of 35.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's a veteran.
Yeah.
And then at 200 and 400, I think it was, we said.
Yeah.
That kind of, when I looked up your results and it said 100 m, that's 100 miles, right? But no, it's 100 meters.
Yeah.
I can't get my head around. I can't think that I can run 100 meters at pace. That hurts too much. Whereas I can run 100 miles. Do you feel the sort of opposite way around?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. And like I say, I can remember the pain of training for the marathon, because I did put training into that, and I remember I just, that it was just sore. I was always just sore. Everything always sort of hurt. But then equally, I sometimes think that people don't understand. So we've got like our middle distance group, and then you've got a sprint group at the track, and the middle distance group will go round and round and round, and then they'll see us and we'll do sort of, a 150, and then I'm having 15 minutes rest because I need to recover before I go again. And they're like, oh, you're doing nothing and sitting having a cup of tea and all that. There is just a bit of joke between them. But then sometimes I think people don't understand, I guess, the intensity that you do need for your track sessions and just how hard they are. But I could not, like I say again, distance just hurts too much.
So in a normal track session, how long does it last? What do you actually do during that session?
So tonight it was a quick session for me, but so tonight we'll do like a lot of plyo work. So the session itself's never probably really that long. So tonight I ran 450 meters, then I had 15 minutes recovery, and then ran 300, and that's my full session. But generally we'll do a lot of plyo work beforehand. You'll do a lot of drills, we'll do a lot of bounds, and then we'll do some explosive gym work and then get into the session. So the session itself is never really that long. So Monday night I ran 6 300s with 90-second recovery, but then I was at the track for like an hour and a half, close to 2 hours, because it's all of the sort of prep work that you do beforehand.
So during, like you said tonight, that you did one, what was it?
Done a 400.
You did a 400, then you had a 15-minute break. What do you do during that 15 minutes?
Just mobilize. You kind of just, so a 15-minute we would class as, so because the 450 was, almost at max effort, you're then trying to have full recovery. So you're just keeping mobilized. Obviously in the winter it's quite hard because it gets cold. So, you've got your dry rub and just making sure that you keep warm, and then, go again. But it passes quite quick.
Do you wear a heart rate monitor? Is that how you know when you're recovered, or is it just?
No, just going off generally, I guess, kind of probably what my coach has worked out, that I sort of need to be able to then repeat a rep at the same speed. I guess it's kind of just trial and error what we've done across the season to say, right, okay, generally 15 minutes is where that works for me. But he is quite good in that, if I'm feeling, feeling fatigued, I train with juniors as well. And sometimes, it's great because they're so fast and the pull us along. But, I do have to remember, and I know 35 certainly isn't old, but that I do need that, I might need a little bit more recovery, or, and Dan is my coach, and Dan NJ, and he will, make sure that he tailors my session to fit me as a masters athlete.
So in that, as Mike says, you keep yourself warm in those 15 minutes. Do you eat anything, or do you have a sports drink, or what would you have for things like that?
Electrolytes are just because I always take those with us, and then I'll snack on cashews, but generally just because probably I'm just quite picky, not really that I think that I need them, but I know that they're in my bag just in case. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Before, like, if you were at a track meet, is that what you call it? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Do you do one event during, like, is a meet sort of one day, How many races have you got in that day?
So it depends really, I guess, on what I'm targeting. If it's a seat, like there's certain races that we call senior leagues, and that's where I'm racing against seniors, I might only target 2 races, because they're not medal races or they're not championship races. So I might just think, right, okay, I'm going to target 2 because they're a training race for us. So I'll do generally the 100 meters because that's first, and then I get about an hour and a half, and then the 400. If it's a championship race, I'll kind of look at the lineup, I guess, and see who's sort of entered. I might wait and enter a little bit later and see who's entered. One, just to see what the competition's like, because I don't want to put myself in a race if there's not enough competition and where I'm just going to fatigue myself, maybe enter the 200 just because, but yet the 400 race, there might be a lot stronger people in there. And I want to try and save myself for that race if I haven't got anybody to race against in the 200. Does that make sense? But championships this year I've always entered at least 2, if not 3, which would be my 3 distances of the 100, 200 and 400.
And the next question that I'm going to ask, and Mike will probably cringe at this, and so will probably the rest of the population that are listening. I hear about a thing called the Diamond League. Now, I've heard about it. Athletics is not my forte.
Yeah.
It's not something I really follow. But I've heard of that. So how do you get a place in that? I take it that's if you're the best of the best and it's all the best ones coming together, and is that quite a prestigious thing for you to get into?
Oh yes, so that's like sort of your elite athletes. It's like, so I went to the Diamond League in London this year. To watch, and Keely Hodgkinson was meant to be in it, but she dropped out. But there was like Noah Lyles, there was the Jamaicans there was Josh Kerr. It was phenomenal. It was stacked with absolute talent. Femke Ball on the hurdles, it was just amazing.
I guess that's the difference between competing at a sort of British level and competing at a world level. Would that sum it up?
So a lot of the athletes will target those races as sort of warm-up races to get times in order to be able to then go into things like the World Championships.
Go back to not necessarily your session tonight, but your sort of track meets. How do you prepare in terms of you want your glycogen levels up before you do your all-out sprints, that type of? Are you eating? What are you drinking? You said you had the electrolytes on a normal session at night, but before how do you get into prime racing fitness?
Yeah, I'm quite a stickler for staying with the same routine. So in the morning, I always have like eggs, avocado, bagel. That is my go-to breakfast if I know that I'm going to compete, because it's something that'll keep us full. I love overnight oats and I have them religiously every morning. But on a track meeting, I have them as my lunch because it's something that I'm quite nervous and there's a lot of adrenaline, especially if I'm running multiple races and it's a full day thing. It's something that's just easy to get down. There's no chewing involved. It can just kind of like, if I'm feeling quite anxious and stuff, it's just getting that substance into it. And then I'll have my electrolytes, and then I always have like jellies, either a little Haribo or something like that, to keep us going. But that was a bit of a standing joke, because we went to I went to Ayr for the Scottish Masters this year, and we stayed in a Premier Inn, and I upgraded my room, and it was £50 just to upgrade my room so I could have a fridge, because I needed my overnight oats in. And everybody was like, that is the most expensive overnight oats you'll ever have, but it's just routine, and I needed to keep that. Well, little did I know, Ayr was absolutely freezing in July, so I could have just had them in the car.
Whereas we're used to going to races and slumming it and probably even sleeping in the car. But yeah, as you say, just leave it outside. It would have worked.
It would have worked. There was no need for the upgrade. But it was a bit of a standing joke. They were all laughing at me. But it's just having that same, and not doing anything different. It's trying to keep that, routine as strict as possible.
Yeah, I think I might have pushed out to having a cool box and putting an ice block or something in it. Maybe going to the supermarket and buying a bag of ice rather than the 50 quid just for a fridge.
I know, it was extreme.
So that £50 was just for the fridge then? It wasn't even a better bed or a bath or anything like that?
No, no. It's meant to be a bit of a fancier room, but I was like, oh, have you got a TV on the wall? Have you got it? And they're all like, yes. So literally the difference was, oh, have you got a fridge? No. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you speak about nerves as well before your events.
Mm-hmm.
And as we mentioned, you got to the Europeans as well. How was that before you got onto that track with the others? How did you deal with that?
Honestly, I didn't deal with it very well at all. You know, and I listened to your podcast, and it with Alison Beveridge, was it Alison?
Alice.
Yeah.
Alice, yeah. And that just so hit home with me. You know, it was the imposter syndrome, and I think I've always had that on the track, and I think it's because I haven't started track from a young age. You know, my drills aren't sharp, and I know that my shapes aren't always right, and there's a lot of drills that I can't do. And just because I haven't got that, I just can't get that rhythm, I just can't get that coordination right. And yeah, so it was, I got onto the warm-up track, and I'd already been ill in the days leading up to it. And I was a bit of a mess, and I got on that warm-up track, and I was, Sweden, it just head to toe in all of this kit, and I just felt so out of place. And I'd never had to run like heats before, so I'd never had to try and like qualify for a final. I'd always just sort of turned up, and I had that one job, and it was just run once around the track. And it was understanding the tactics of that. Don't go out too hard because you don't want to ruin yourself for the next day, but you want the best lane draw possible that you can get. And it was all very plain on my mind. But the Europeans this year was never really on my radar. My radar was to finish my season at the British Champs, and we just ended up adding the Europeans on as a little bit of a last minute. It was after I'd been to Scotland actually and done the Scottish Champs. We ended up saying, I spoke to my husband, and he was like, yeah, let's go for it. You're running well. If you're going to do it any year, this is the year to get into it. And I was like, it'll just be so much fun. It'll be really nice. I've had the best season ever, and we'll end it on a high. It was really, really mentally tough. And then I finished the first 400, and I found out that I'd qualified, and it was, of course that's what I wanted to do. But then ultimately I thought, I've got to go through all of this again. Mm-hmm. And I'd seen a girl who had new on the warm-up track, and she was like, and I just started crying, and I was like, I'm not okay. Like, I'm really overwhelmed. Like, I'm, and it was really mentally tough. And I thought in my head, I was going for a lovely little holiday away with my husband. I was going to, run in this, GB Masters best and wear my country's colours, and it was going to be all great. And yeah, it was actually really, really hard. And then on paper, I could have been in a chance for a medal, a bronze medal. I thought I could have kind of fought for. And in order to get myself on the track the next day for the final, I said, okay, comfortably, you can come fifth. Like, that's comfortable. Like, that you can come fifth. And I came off the bend, and it was quite tough, the lane draw that I was in, because I was me, and then I was an Olympian in the race. So I was in lane 3, and she was in lane 4. And then the next 3 girls who I would have been able to compete with were in the other lanes. So 5, 6, and 7. So they were bunched together and had each other to work off, where I, obviously the Olympian, left straight away, So I kind of had an empty lane next to me. And I knew the girls in lane 1 and 2, wouldn't have been able to kind of keep up to my pace. So I came off the bend, and I looked, and I thought, I'm in 5th position. And then I just let it go. I thought, this is where I'm going to finish. And I didn't fight for it. But when I crossed the finish line, I was relieved. I was really, really pleased with myself. I thought, I've done it. I've overcome such a massive barrier, mental barrier to be here. But then when you get home, it's the guilt and the frustration of, I got to that bend, seen where I was, and just said, this is where you're meant to be. And I didn't fight for that. And it's then the guilt of, we're paid to go away. I've left the kids for a week, which I've never ever done before. And that was quite tough. And I was really, really flat afterwards.
Yeah.
Whereabout were, like you say, you went on holiday for this race. Whereabout was it?
Madeira.
So how far away is that?
So I think, was it about a 3-hour, 4-hour flight nearly? Mm-hmm.
Nikki, go and ask another question. I'm going to just figure something out.
So, and if anyone is fortunate enough to follow Lauren and watch that, was it the final that your husband filmed and put on Instagram? Because I remember watching it, and the thing that actually got a lump in my throat, it wasn't even watching you run, it was hearing how much he was cheering, shouting, "Go on, Lauren!" And it was just, it was a bit like one of those, like Ailish McColgan moments, and you're like that. It really sucks you in. You're like, "Oh, come on!"
He has been at just about every race this year. He's definitely my number one fan, and I think it's really important that that I always kind of say it's tough when you've got kids, and and I still work full time. James works full time, and he has sacrificed his own training in order for me to be able to. I said this year, I really want to try and give it a good go to see what I can do at the track. And he's really sort of put his training on hold in order for me to get all of my sessions in. We've prioritized, sort of the kids' schedules, then my schedule, and then James, just bless him, would just fit in, wherever. But yeah, hearing him and the kids on the, when I come onto that home straight, it's just absolutely priceless. But yeah, on all of my videos, he's obviously took a video every race he's been in, and you can just hear him. And actually at the British Champs, it was live streamed. So he didn't actually, and everybody assumed James took the video because all you can hear is him absolutely screaming. When it wasn't, it was like, a camera guy up in the stand somewhere. So yeah, he's a good egg.
What I was going to ask, it's approximately 2,500 kilometers away. How long was the race that you did?
400 meters.
That's quite a ratio.
Yes, yeah. I did 2 of them though, so 800 meters in total.
And just following on from what we were chatting about there about James, what's his discipline? Is he track as well, or does he do longer distances?
No, he's very much like he's more into the gym than he is running. And then I'm into running, and I remember we've done a few park runs together. And I'll be like, push it and get a PB. And he'd be like, I actually don't care, Lauren. Like, not bother. He loves trail running. He loves, like, half marathon, that sort of doesn't, but he likes to plod and enjoy the scenery and things. He doesn't like to push himself. He likes to just sort of take it all in. And we're doing a High Rocks together last year. And he was just like, oh, it'll be so nice for us to do something together. And then he was like, this is not what I've signed up for. Go. And that's just, we're totally talking cheese. And yeah.
So you're the more encouraging one, shall we say?
Yeah.
Is there any distance that he, like, if you were racing against each other, both going for it, that he would beat you at? Would that be marathon or even further? Or would he get to the point and say, I'm not doing that?
So I think he would definitely, I would say anything from half onwards. I still think I would take him on a 10K for sure, but
So it sounds like we've got a 10K challenge coming up.
Well, to give him food for thought, there's lots of lovely events up north of the border, Lauren.
Yeah.
Right, out of all the events that you've done, all the locations, what is your favourite race?
So my favourite sort of run, I guess, if I'm looking at what I've done in distance, it has to be Edinburgh Marathon, just because of how special that was, for me and for my friend's family. In terms of, tracks that I run on, I guess Madeira was pretty special. It was in the mountains. It was gorgeous, although I didn't enjoy the race itself, but the track was beautiful. But favourite, I guess, track race that I've done, I think a standout run for us this year was I entered my first championship race this year. Now, before this year, I wouldn't enter any race that had the word championship in it, because I just thought, I'm not that sort of, I'm not good enough to be in those sort of races. And I entered a senior championship, not even a, masters. So it was racing with, younger girls, and I put myself on a start line with, girls with legs that went on forever and, you know, just in their prime. And I came first and I got a massive PB in the 400 meters, and it was just like totally disbelief that I'd done that I'd, you know, like I say, put myself in that position in a race that I wouldn't have ran when I was a senior. And, you know, I got, you know, just so happened that like the outcome was just even more sweeter as well.
Right. Are all tracks the same nowadays?
No.
How do they differ?
So they're very different in that, I guess, you know, some people will walk onto a track and feel them. So when I got to Madeira, straight away, one of the guys was like, what's the track like? And I said, I'd done a lap, and I went, it's all right. And he was like, I need more than that. And he'll go on and he'll touch the track and, you know, really wants to see, you know, is it hard? Is it spongy? And it's tough. You don't want, Air's track was pretty new, so it was very spongy and bouncy, which is quite slow. But then we've got a track here at Gateshead, which is really, really hard. So then you get no traction from it at all. So it's, you know, it's very weird how tracks can differ, and, you know, you can definitely feel faster on certain tracks.
But back in the, I'm guessing olden days now, you probably don't get them, cinder tracks. Have you ever raced on one of them?
No, no, I haven't.
And obviously, as well, you mentioned about you took cross-country spikes to your first race. What are the actual spikes like for track? Because that's something I've never ever done. Are the spikes tiny, and are the shoes expensive?
I guess like all shoes, they can be expensive, can't they? I mean, some of your running shoes now, you know, I got a pair of Alpha Flies or Vapor Flies. So when I was doing the road, I've got a pair of those, and I would literally warm up in my other trainers because I would only want to use them for the distance that I was running, because I was like, I'm not putting any more miles on these with how much they have cost, you know.
Yep.
Very much the same with spikes. You've got you know, I do have like basically I've got the Alphas or the Vapor Flies of spikes, the spikes version, and they've got like a little bubble in, and they're sprint ones, and they're, you know, quite springy and, you know, really push you onto your toes. And then I've got some middle distance spikes that I'll do like my long, like Monday night training, tonight's training in, which haven't got that bubble in. They're a little bit flatter, but honestly not a lot to them in terms of material or anything. So light.
In a sort of longer distance shoe, the manufacturers will tell you get 400 miles out of a pair of shoe, and then you must change them. Whereas I go with, like, my body will start hurting in certain places, and I'll know my shoe needs changed. Is it the same with shorter distance shoes?
I guess so, probably, but I'm quite I like a new pair of spikes for every season. So I've never probably really wore them in that much, whereas my road shoes used to see me, you know, like you say, and I would look at the bottom of the tread and there'd be nothing there, and I'd be like, a few more races I can get out of those, you know. Whereas my spikes, because I guess now it is the same with road shoes as well, because it wasn't when I was running on the road, but, you know, they bring the shoes out, and the same as they bring the spikes out, that, you know, they're faster shoes, you know, they've got the, you know, carbon plates in and all that sort of stuff, and the spikes are very much the same as well. But yeah, so for us as well, you know, because we've got the spikes in, we can obviously just change those, you know, whereas obviously your road shoes, it's the bottoms of them as well, isn't it? Whereas, you know, we can just change the spikes in them and the bottom, and then, you know, you've basically got new grip there.
Yeah, the super shoes that you were talking about, like the Alpha Flies, Vapor Flies, that sort of thing, they've got carbon fiber in them. Is that technology the same in track shoes?
Yes, yeah.
Are they like hard, no give in them? Do you not have the cushioning? How does it differ?
I'm not totally sure, if I'm honest, but we've got like so like I say, the sprint ones have got like a bubble in, they've got like a bubble around the bottom, but the material is just, there's not a lot to them at all. The sprint ones are a little bit, mine certainly are a little bit harder at the front, and I guess it's to accommodate for that bubble. But then your middle distance spikes, if you looked at them, they're pretty flimsy. You know, there's really not a lot to them at all.
Yeah, I've got one pair of carbon shoes. I've hardly, like you don't want to wear them unless you really need to wear them, and they are material holds the shoe on, and that's it. There's no comfort or anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I decided once I was moving on to the trails and never doing a road race ever again in my life, I started using my alpha flies and vapor flies in training as a confidence boost to make me feel fast.
I can remember actually when you got your first pair.
Yeah.
I can remember that you got them. I'm sure you were telling us that you got them.
I got them at a bargain.
A bargain, yeah. I remember that. Mm-hmm.
Back wall in the Nike outlet, last pair of my size. I've still got them. So they are a lot of fun to run in, but I'm probably the slowest runner that's ever ran in them. So we touched a little bit as well earlier on what you eat during your runs and what you eat on the lead up to your events and that. With your diet in general, are you quite strict with yourself and do you track, or is it not quite as bad? Because I would imagine from my perspective, if you're a fast track athlete, male, female, whatever, would you not have to be lighter to be able to be faster, or is that not the case?
So I guess I'm really trying to learn this year with nutrition, and it is a minefield, isn't it? And I don't think it matters what sort of distance that you're running, or even if you're not running, it's a minefield. So this year I've really tried to put a little bit of focus in understanding, what foods, are anti-inflammatories, what foods are causing inflammation, what's good for us. I spent a little bit of time tracking calories, which I don't usually, but just to see what I needed in order for my body not to feel fatigued. Because if I'm going along to do a really heavy session, it's really important that I hit those times. I have to get used to running those times. And I can't do that if I'm not feeling fueled. So I tracked, and I generally will try and eat around about 2,500, 2,700 calories a day. I guess if it's non-training day, I try and, around 2,500. And if I'm training, around 2,700. But, and I do try and have that, like I say, from cashew nuts, I try and eat, pita breads with hummus and, carrots and cucumber and stuff. Whereas I used to eat like a Trek bar, and I used to think that was healthy, or, I would have a lot of on-the-go foods that, like, are labeled as high protein, and and I guess I've really tried to understand a little bit more about actually what is actually really good for us. But I can't sit here and say that I stick to, my meals are always really good. I always have my overnight oats. I always have a pita bread stuffed with a chicken breast and some Greek yogurt and a bit of salad for lunch. And then on an evening, me and my husband will always have a tea. We'll always make dinner. But what I snack on in between isn't necessarily always great. So like tonight, I was going to the track and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't got any protein milk for afterwards. I haven't got any cashews or grapes in the fridge. So I got the Halloween Skittles, because I thought, well, I need something. So I got the Skittles, and, so it isn't always perfect, but it's, I don't drink alcohol now. I don't, we used to have a Friday night would be takeaway night, and that was just like a done thing. And I think when I started, try and get more and more competitive, and I wanted my times to come down, I thought, right, okay, well, I can't have, a few glasses of Prosecco and sit and eat in Indians and then think that I'm going to, work really hard on Monday when I get back to the track. It just doesn't work. So I've really, cut that out and stopped those sorts of foods. But like I say, I'm not saying when I have a cup of tea, I don't go into the biscuit jar or whatever. It's definitely about balance. But I'm trying to just understand a little bit more about foods. And I know Joe Wicks brought that thing out, and I haven't seen it yet. Was it License to Kill? Have you seen that? He's brought a documentary out. So he's brought it.
I think I know what you're on about.
Yeah, he's brought
Coach Mike.
Oh yes, the body coach. He's brought a protein bar out. So have you not seen this? No.
Yeah.
I think I've seen a little bit.
And he's called it License to Kill. I think if I remember it right, he's called it License to Kill. And he's just basically saying, and on one side it's got him, flexing and, looking great. And on the other side, it's got him going zombie and just saying, if you eat this, it may cause cancer, diarrhea, and just really frank, honest. And he's done a documentary, and I haven't seen it yet, but he's talking about all of the hidden ingredients in these foods that are labeled as high protein and all that sort of stuff. And, are marketed and advertised to be really good for our when in fact actually they're not great at all. And he's not saying that things aren't good in moderation. He's not saying don't ever eat these. He's just saying have a better understanding, where I would think nothing of having a Trek bar every day or a grenade bar every day because I was, well, it's protein. and I need it, you know, but it's just about understanding actually where, you know, understand whole foods, and like I say, foods that are anti-inflammatory and not causing issues.
See when you're doing sessions, you're doing 300 3 weeks in a row, all out effort. Do you notice a difference if you're like, say you're having your Skittles before your session or after your session? Is there a time difference or even just a feeling during that session?
So I think not particularly, probably, but I think after I finish a session, I always know that I need to get something into this, and probably pretty quick, because I've got that by the time I do my cool down, and then I know that I've got 40 minutes drive back home. I'll like start and crash if I don't have anything, like, you know, like I say, whether it's I take a protein shake or I take like just some grapes or something that I can just get into this that I know that's just going to keep us going till I get back home. Otherwise I'll start and crash, and then when I get in, it will be a case of trying to grab any sugar. I think sometimes, you know, I took the Skittles tonight, and sometimes I think it's just a habit as well, like thinking, oh well, I must have something, you know. So yeah, sometimes it's definitely a habit. But if I've done a hard session, or if I've done a hard session, I know that I'm going in the gym afterwards as well. I know I'm not surviving that if I don't have something.
And things like the sort of distances that we do, you're taking food on constantly. For a shorter race, you're obviously not, because every sort of bend that you're going to down a gel, it's not going to happen. Would you have a gel before you start a race?
No, no.
Would you even contemplate trying it? Does anybody else that you know do that sort of thing?
No, not that I know of. We're on about the other day, you know, we're all kind of lining our supplements out and, you know, saying what everybody sort of takes. And one of the guys said that he takes pre-workout before a race. So obviously it's just got caffeine in, and he was like, you know, just keeps us switched on and ready to go. I used pre-workout a lot when I was training for High Rocks, just because, you know, I guess it was that morning workout. I was going at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I even before like the actual High Rocks events, I would take pre-workout. But I think that was because I was, you know, there were long events, you know, in order to keep us going for that length of time. But for like 200, 400 meters, I've never felt that it's needed, and I don't think, like I say, a lot of people generally would take a gel on.
Yeah, I went for a run this morning. My normal Wednesday run is start at 6 o'clock in the morning, 10-mile run. But I've only had a banana. I take pre-workout for that, but only because it's got a lot of caffeine in it. I don't drink tea or coffee because I don't like the taste. So that wakens me up in the morning.
I know that's the same for me. I drink decaf tea, so I think it was that 6 o'clock getting us up and getting us, you know, and I knew that my session would be an hour in the gym, and it's seen us through that. Whereas, you know, for the 200 meters, as long as I fueled right, then my body should feel okay to get through, you know, less than 60 seconds.
You mentioned time, like 6 in the morning, but your session tonight was at night. Is there a particular time of day that you train?
So my gym sessions are generally always, we do a little bit of gym after track, but my main gym sessions are generally always 6 o'clock in the morning, because that has no impact on, you know, family life, kids, and I can just kind of be going and go and get back, and the kids aren't even out of bed. But obviously my sessions at the track are always an evening.
So you might have already have answered this, Lauren. We're not sure, just don't want to assume what the answer might be to this, but what do you feel is your biggest running achievement?
So I guess it hasn't came probably from a time or a medal at all. It's probably come from, I think, the money raised, you know, again, just going back to that, you know, fundraising and that sort of stuff there. That was a real big achievement from running. And I think it's overcoming the barriers of, you know, this year I said to myself, no excuses. And I've really held myself accountable to that. And I've not let myself, you know, in the past I've thought, oh, you're tired, you know, you've had a hard day, you're okay to skip a session. you know, whereas this time I've said, oh, I don't want to go, and I've said to my husband loads of times this year, I just can't be bothered. And he's like, well, don't go. And I'm like, I have to go. Do you know, like my motivation can be really low sometimes, but you know, I'm holding myself accountable because I've set goals, and if I don't hit them, and I know that it's because I haven't worked for them, then that's on me. If I don't hit them and I've worked as hard as I can, then that's okay, because I know that I've really put everything that I've had into it.
I think if you're really passionate about an event or a race or a goal that you have, I actually feel that the guilt of missing that session is worse than not doing it.
Yeah,
So you're just better to do it.
Exactly. I know, definitely. That's, you know, 100%. So yeah, and you never come away from it, you know, I never come back from a session and think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You know, like I go and I come back and, you know you're going to feel better afterwards, don't you? You know you're going to feel good for it. But, you know, when motivation's really low, it is tough. But this year I've said no excuses and I've meant it. And that's,
Yeah.
you know, a really big achievement that I haven't, you know, that I've held myself accountable and stuck to it.
And obviously that consistency has paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned earlier you did your 100K, you've done the marathon, and throughout, well, the 100K anyway, you were thinking, why am I doing this? I hate this.
Yeah.
Going down the distances, down to, say, 200 meters,
Mm-hmm.
you're coming round the bend. What are you thinking about?
Do you know, it's, yeah, probably not really thinking all that much. I think it's, you know, on a 200-meter race, you go out hard and whoever wins is the person who slows the least. You know, there's not a lot of tactics into it. It's get around that bend as quick as you can and you come off and you just, it's over so quick. So I don't like the 100 because it is too short for me, because I'm like, you start and you finish and people say, how was that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. You know, it was less than 13 seconds. I'm not quite sure, you know, like it's just over. The 200 I like because I like a bend, and I really love coming off a bend. The bend's the best part of my race. But yeah, not a lot of time to think. You've probably got a little bit more time in the 400, you know, but I'm really just checking in with myself, you know, reminding myself, right, relax, keep your form. It's important not to try and, you know, I think people might think that the 400, although it's a sprint, is go out as hard as you can and hold on. That's definitely not the thing to do, because you're blowing up if you do that. So it's important not to get carried away and go with people, but to be able to react when you need to. So I guess around the 400, I'm generally just thinking, you know, checking in with myself. How's your form? How are you doing? You know, stay focused.
So is around 400 meters the first time that tactics become a thing? So if somebody else is going out too fast, or maybe they're even trying to make you go faster.
Yeah, definitely. So there was a race what I'd done in August where I knew my biggest competition was about 4 lanes away from me, so we're really spread apart. And I thought, right, I'm going to go out as hard as I can, and this is where I blew up, and catch her up, and then I'm going to put a lot of pressure on her, and I'm coming first. It didn't work that way. I caught her up, I blew up, she blew up, and then we both fought each other to the line, and she pipped us. But then it was funny because then when I ran the British champs, I was in the outside lane. So I thought, right, well, I've got, you know, everybody's kind of can see me. I can't see them, but I'm going to go out hard so that everybody follows us. And then I know, you know, I knew that I could relax around the bend and go again, whereas they would probably still be pushing to try and keep up with us. So yeah, there's definitely tactics in it. Not as much that I would say that's involved in like the 800 and the 1500 meters when you have to break. You know, and you've got a lot of sort of elbowing and all that sort of stuff, which I've never been involved in because I've never run those races competitively. But yeah, there's definitely some tactics to it.
So in the distances that we tend to run at events and things like that, a lot of us tend to take shots at volunteering, and similar with park runs as well.
I thought you were just going to stop at shots. Oh, sorry, go on.
Do you, is it the same in the track world, that like when there's competitions and events, do you all have to take turns at volunteering and marshalling and what have you?
We don't know. So you have to be like qualified to be able to volunteer at the track. So I'm so ignorant of this, so please excuse it and don't take what I say for gospel, but you do have to have done like an officiating course to be an official on a track. So I know that much is true. But yeah, so they couldn't just turn up and, you know, I would be sitting taking times or whatever. You can't do that. So yeah, you have to be. So there's generally, you know, and I mean, there's one of Harris's, one of my son's coaches, for Morpeth running club. He coaches for Morpeth running club, and my son just runs with their little group. Him and his wife go all over. So they were at Derby, you know, officiating for the British champs. You know, there was officials from here that was over in Madeira, you know, and it's quite like
Does it tend to be people that used to run themselves that go into the coaching and the officiating?
Yeah, people that used to run themselves, or people that have got their children running, you know, whether they're younger or older, they generally kind of then get involved. So yeah, and it was nice to see some familiar faces from, you know, track meetings here officiating over in Madeira, definitely.
And we asked about, are all tracks the same? Are all locations, like you're within a stadium? Is there a bucket list that you'd have, an ideal track, an ideal location, an ideal event, anything?
I would like to go to obviously I've done the Masters Europeans. That'll be again in 2 years' time in Finland. Next year it's the World Masters, and I'll not go next year, but I would like to maybe go when I'm V40 or maybe it's even V45, and it'll all kind of really just depend on, I guess, you know, the kids and the location, and, you know, if it's convenient, because if I was going to the Worlds, I would want to be there for the relays and do, you know, the 2 weeks, and you know, the kids would have to be there with us. So probably when they're a little bit older, but definitely something that I would love to do. And I think, you know, I've got a lot of growing in confidence to do before that.
Is there different races for, say, you said start at V35, but well, senior before that, and then it's every 5 years, or is there different ones for each one?
Yeah, so at Madeira, or like any race like the British champs, you've got like, it goes up in the 5 years, but then all the events are the same for each age category. And I have to say, and not that I met him, but there was a V90 for Great Britain in Madeira running the 400, and he was called Colin Spivey. So, and I only know this because obviously me and my husband were just sitting looking at all and I was like, oh my gosh, there's V90, and there was 3 V90s. You know, one of them was GB. He took the gold in Madeira, and I googled. Well, I put him into Power of 10. He runs park run every week in 30 minutes. 90-year-old.
You know, life goal, still being able to.
Absolutely. Just like, isn't it for everybody? You know, it's for everybody. Yeah. So it goes up every 5 years. So you would race your age category. But every event is the same. So you would run the 400, whether you were V35 or V50 or V90.
Just before we move back on to the formal question set, there's only a couple left anyway, Lauren, but just one that's came into my head there. Do you ever do cross country or anything like that?
No, that was a one-time gig.
Yeah.
But you've got the shoes.
But I've got the shoes, absolutely.
No, cross country looks far too hard.
Oh yeah, when I was trying this whole distance thing, and yeah, it didn't work out for us.
See, when you're doing your at least 100 meters, 200 meters, probably you start in starting blocks.
So I don't, and I haven't all year, and I've had some blocks for about 5 years. And it was sort of said, when I said to my coach that I wanted to go to Madeira, he was like, we need to get in blocks. He was like, you can't go to the Europeans and not be in blocks. And we tried it for a few training sessions, but I was more focused on how I was coming out of the blocks as opposed to hitting the target times, and it was impacting my training sessions because I was like, oh, you know, I can feel that I'm not coming out right. So then I was thinking about how I started the race, how I started the rep, as opposed to what my job was, you know, in terms of time or hitting those targets. So I just said to him, like, I'm not comfortable. And I think that it probably, you know, adds to the imposter syndrome because everybody was in blocks. And especially at, you know, the British champs and then the Europeans, the blocks are in your lane ready for you. And when I was at the Europeans and I'm saying to the guy, oh, can you take my blocks away? He didn't speak English. He didn't understand. And I point the blocks and I'm saying no. And I'm thinking, oh, everybody's practicing their strides out. And I'm standing here trying to communicate that I don't want these blocks. And my nerves are just, you know, like, yeah. So we've got a plan. So we're working on like a 4-week block at the minute. So I've started with sort of rolling starts, so falling into them. Then I've done 3-point starts. So that's where you go into a crouch and one arms up, and then I've got my crouch starts, and then we'll go into block. So it's kind of, I already do crouch starts, but he kind of just wants to go back to really the beginning and go back to basics. And winter's a good time to do it because I haven't got competitions coming up, so I've got a good time just to get some good training block in, and hopefully I'll go to the Scottish Masters indoors. I'm hoping in February, and I'll be flying out of them blocks.
See, when you go to the gym, what kind of exercises are you doing? Are you doing specific for, say, like calf raises to strengthen your getting out the blocks, I guess, or is it just a sort of general all-round fitness regime?
No, yeah, it's better, and that's something that I've had to, you know, get used to adapting to and adjusting this year, because I used to train with some girls in the gym, but would do very much like, you know, probably a lot of high rocks, you know, type training, because I think that is quite big in the gyms at the moment. It's certainly everywhere down here. Or we'll do, like you say, just general fitness stuff. And I've kind of had to get used to training solo now because nobody else is doing, like you say, the calf raises. You know, I'll do a lot of cleans, or I'll do a lot of like quarter squats, you know, where I'm really using as lightweight to make sure that that rep's explosive, as opposed to trying to go heavy into a deep squat. So yeah, and I'll do a lot of stuff that, you know, I'll have a barbell you know, on my back, and then I'll have a couple of plates, and I'll just be stepping onto them. That's all I'll be doing, you know, and it doesn't look like a lot, but it's kind of just getting those shapes right. So yeah, it's definitely different to what I've been used to, but I have enjoyed it.
So moving back on to the formal question set, and as we say, just a couple more left. Well, this is a question we really like to ask all the guests. So is there anyone that you would love to run with, like your bucket list running buddy, whether it be real or not, fictional or not, here with us or not?
Yeah, so it has to be Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce. No, so Jamaican sprinter. She is an absolute icon in the sprinting world. She is probably, I think, only maybe one of, or you know, very few of the only female sprinter that's ran through 3 decades and got world titles in all 3 decades. You know, she's a mum. I think she just embodies joy when you see her on the track. She embodies joy, but so much resilience. You know, she's had a lot of injuries. She's, you know, she's been at the top of her game, and she'll you know, she still comes to race and compete, even though she's not at the level, you know, of where the others are now, the younger ones. But, and I say that, but you know, she's still coming, you know, high up and running incredibly fast times. She's very much been a mentor towards the new Jamaican sprinters that are up and coming. And I just think, yeah, and she's quite flamboyant. She's got, you know, she's always got different wigs on, rainbow color hair, and just radiates, like you just see her and walk on, and just so much energy. And yeah, I think the mum thing for me as well, always, you know, it's something that you always respect, don't you, when there's somebody who, you know, whether it's, you know, Joe Blogs on the street, that's, you know, a mum and she's just getting up and she's doing parkrun, or she's, you know, it's just, it's a lot when, you know, yeah, when you've got a lot on at home and stuff. So I just think anybody doing it, but then like to do it at that level and for that long is incredible. So yeah, I think I one of our wigs on, and
I think that's the thing that sticks out. That's the name. I wasn't sure who it was. I looked it up. Yeah, it's the Jamaican runner with the bright red hair, or bright green, or whatever it is this week. You know her if you see her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So are you going to have flamboyant hair the next time you're racing?
No, I'm very much a plain Jane. Way back goblin. It's whatever I've had time to do in the morning. But yeah, if Shelley borrowed as a wig, I would wear it.
And it definitely wouldn't be washed first. You have to.
No.
No, you can't wash the luck off
No.
in the grass.
It's not luck, it's hard work.
It's watercraft. That's why I corrected it.
Yeah.
So to wrap it us up for tonight, tell us what is next.
So I am hoping that I've never done an indoors before, and I don't know if you've seen the tracks, but they're very different. So they're curved tracks, so you very much run on a bank, and they're 200-meter tracks. So you split, you do a break, I think at the 150 for the 400. So I'm hoping that I will run my first indoors next year, sorry. So, and I'm thinking that I'm going to target the Scottish Masters in Glasgow. I've heard that it is one of the best tracks. Indoor tracks. It's meant to be
10 minutes from my house.
It's meant to be really, really good. It's certainly meant to be, I think, the holy grail of tracks around here. So I'm going to target that. I would like to think that I can keep training going and retain the V35 British champ title, at least for the 400 next year.
I really hope that's on a date that I can go to.
I know.
Nikki will be wanting a trackside ticket.
I'm sure I could probably blag one, Mike. It's fine.
Absolutely.
Well, that's brought us to a close. Unless Nikki's got any other questions that came to mind.
From me. Well,
thank you for an insight to a running experience that I've never had before. I just said thank you for coming on. Thank you, Nikki, for being Nikki, and it's goodbye from me.
Thanks, Lauren.
No, thank you both so much. It's been a pleasure.
Right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.